I am Sylvia Oberly, a member of the planning team here at Knollwood Baptist Church. I know you're glad with us that it's February the 1st and no longer January after that cold, icy, and snowy month. And as we gather today, we express our concern for the many people in our community whose lives have been uprooted by the large fertilizer plant that's still burning. We hope that they are finding safe and supportive places in which to stay today and over the next few days. We have some wonderful guests with us today, and I will introduce them in just a few minutes. But as we start, I want to remind you of a few housekeeping matters. First, we do record each of our sessions so that we can share with others not able to attend. And to ensure the best quality recording, we ask that you keep your audio on mute throughout the initial presentations. As you have questions, please put them in the chat function, and we will be checking on those and will address them during our question and answer session at the end, although our guests have told us that they indeed intend to engage you throughout the process. Our recordings and other information are posted on our Faith in the City Facebook page and on our church website. Information about joining our Facebook group is also available in the chat. Again, welcome to our discussion today. Throughout this year, our focus has been on building community will for equitable schools now. We strive not only to share information about important work taking place in our community, but also to encourage more people to get involved through action and advocacy. Today, we are continuing to look at efforts underway inside our schools and with the help of community partners to ensure a more equitable, safer, and healthier environment for students and for staff. Our guests today are involved in several ways to bring restorative justice and social emotional learning to our schools. Some brief introductions before we hear from them. Latrell Adams is the Director of Social Emotional Learning and Restorative Practice for the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. Previously, she served as a social emotional learning specialist and professional school counselor. She is passionate about designing and leading ongoing professional development focused on equity and strengthening adult social emotional learning for teachers, administrators, district personnel, and parents. Latrell holds a bachelor's degree from UNC Charlotte and a master's from NC A&T State University. Ellen Fox is a product of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Public School System and went on to study education at the University of South Carolina with both bachelor's and master's degrees. She has experience teaching all ages from kindergarten to adult learners and uses these experiences to work with educators and youth alike through her projects at Triad Restorative Justice, where she is a restorative practices trainer and specialist. She's described as being passionate, fun-loving, and you'll see a lot of that today. She has been instrumental in the Lead Together initiative, a program to bring the voices of youth into discussions about safe and healthy schools. So she brings with her the voices of some of these youth today. Please join me in welcoming Ellen and Latrell to Faith in the City.
Thank you, Sylvia. Sylvia's known me since before I was born, so calling her by her first name is still strange.
Yep.
Latrell, how you feeling this morning, friend?
I am doing so wonderful, and I'm so thankful to share space with all of you that are passionate about our community and our students and our schools. So I'm excited. I'm ready to go.
Then let's go. Nope, we're not playing it again. I'm sorry, y'all, but we did open with some music. And we, like Sylvia said, we want to engage y'all. To have a restorative panel means that we are not the only experts. This room has lots of wisdom, lots of people to tap into. It's about getting as many voices as we can to the table. So we want to open with a question that we ask you and invite you to respond to in the chat box. So at the root of restorative justice is this word, restore. And so in the chat, we want to give you a second to think about that. What does it mean to restore? And please, if you're comfortable and willing, would you offer those definitions in the chat? And if you don't have a definition, you could also offer some examples of items that people typically restore.
I can call out the responses in the chat, Ellen, if that's okay.
Please do.
All right, so I'm seeing make whole again. Oh, I love that, right? Forgive, to return to, Megan. I like that. That's great. Bring back to life. Oh, we're good at this. Yes. All right, keep those coming.
When I think of restore, I think of furniture, right? Like antiques. I don't do this. I don't restore things. I'm a millennial. I go to IKEA constantly, but I know that people like to restore those things.
Absolutely. That's one of the first things that I think about too, Ellen, is furniture. I see where Chuck says to make things right. Zach, I like this, to repair the rupture caused. Caused by violence. Heal, yes. Love these responses that are coming in. Yes. Always think of restoring antique pieces, like bringing them back to life to silver or other metals. Absolutely. So much restoration, so much things happening in this chat right now. And thinking about the word restore as we prepare for our time together today.
Yeah, and we want you to be thinking about this root because one thing that I think is always important to name is the work of restorative justice. We need something there to begin with in order to restore it. And a lot of times in the way our society is set up, systems of power or interpersonal relationships, nothing was there to restore to. And so sometimes we also offer the word transform. Like sometimes we need to make things different. We need to not just go back to the way things used to be, especially if they were not healthy, but we need to transform them so that they're stronger. Latrell, before I move on, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, I just love that. I think you hit it all, like you brought it all to life, and definitely those comments. I like another one of the comments that I just want to bring into the space is that of Dean, and it says it can of course be used in different ways, right? To restore to a better place, or less positively to restore to what used to be. And the good old days aren't necessarily good. So I think that goes to what you're saying, Ellen, about sometimes there's that transformation that needs to take place. So thank you all for sharing those as we continue to engage with you for the next few minutes about restorative practices.
Yeah, so to restore, we ask, how do you restore something? But the business that we're in is also asking, how do we restore someone? What does that look like, sound like, feel like? And the short answer is it's different for each person in each situation. So we're trying to create a system that can hold that complexity and nuance for the many individuals who have many different needs. So we're just going to open briefly. Sylvia let us know that restorative justice has been a topic of a past Faith in the City. And so we're not going to spend too much time getting into the weeds of definitions, but we do understand that this is a new topic to a lot of people. And when we have shared language, it allows us to have shared understanding. So I'm going to offer some brief definitions of restorative justice, but with every RJ practitioner, you're going to get a different spin on it. So here's what we offer to you today. So RJ is a community-based approach to building, repairing, and restoring relationships. At its best, RJ provides a space for community members to be held accountable while participating in creating pathways to repair. It encourages stakeholders to reflect upon how their values and beliefs impact the greater community. In the chat, we would love for you to think about this definition, and today we're focusing on how we're bringing this into schools and the school system. So what do you think a relationship-centered school would feel like? I'll pause as we see those come in. What does a relationship-centered school feel like? Safe.
Yeah. Inclusive, like that. Yeah. Welcoming, consistent. Ellen, don't you like that one? I like that one. I like all of these.
My girl, Megan.
Mm-hmm. I like consistent. Respect, personal. Y'all are rocking it out. Inclusive of the students' thoughts. Yes. School where connection is a part of it. I love that.
Yeah.
Selective practice of honoring community.
I mean, these are some lofty things that are hard for adults to produce in their own homes, where you feel like you have sometimes the most control. And so with restorative practices, we say high expectations and high support. And Brooke is acknowledging that, you know, between adults and students, there's sometimes that strange dynamic. And so we're hoping to, what we use as other languages, restorative practices. And it's trying to break down that strange dynamic that's there. We don't want to ignore it. We want to address it. And we want to hopefully offer these schools, these adults, these students, practices that allow them to feel connected, to feel respected, to have our needs met, to be inclusive. So if you hear people talk about restorative practices, sometimes they're used interchangeably, but these are the activities or the strategies or responses that the community uses so that we can build that capacity to foster healthy relationships to begin with. We also have to be looking at equity work and whether our environments are just for all. And then we also have practices that help repair or transform harm and conflict. And so we have been chatting for a while, and we're going to actually open with the Lead Together initiative. I took, you know, it's a school day, and the kids would not take my recommendation to skip school as much as I thought that it would be worth it. They are very responsible people, so they are in classes right now. We do have one youth who's able to join us because she has a more flexible schedule, so she'll be introduced in a moment. But I asked them, you know, why do you think Lead Together is an important initiative, and what is the purpose of it? So I'm just going to pause so you can take in, these are their words, not mine, why they are passionate about this work. And then I'll give you a better definition of Lead Together in a moment. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and we're gonna watch a brief video. This was done through WXII over the summer at the tail end of our work with Lead Together, and it'll explain the initiative that was funded by the Winston-Salem Foundation, partnered with the school district and the Forsyth County Sheriff's Department. And then we're gonna hear from Brooke in a moment too. So here's a video that I hope you're able to see. Latrell, can you see that? I can see your screen. Yeah? All right, I'm gonna press play.
Safety, it also aims to build better relationships between students, administrators, and school resource officers.
As Fox 8's Katie Nordine reports, organizers say the best part is students are leading the conversations.
I wanted to be a part of a change for the better, and I wanted to be able to get my voice heard and a different perspective.
That's why Samir Flagg and other Winston-Salem Forsyth County students are here, brainstorming and sharing ideas, eager to make a difference at their schools.
For so long, adults are the people who are in charge of keeping their schools safe. And we're not saying that that needs to stop. We're saying that what we are missing is the youth voice in these policies, in these practices, in these solutions.
Ellen Fox with Triad Restorative Justice says the Lead Together program, in partnership with Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, aims to change that.
So it's empowering them, but it's also, as adults, letting go of some of that responsibility, because the kids have gifts and wisdom and talents that we don't have, and we want to embrace that and not ever discard or overlook the potential that's there.
Through Lead Together, participants discuss everything from issues surrounding school resource officers to bullying and mental health.
We hope that by engaging the youth's perspective in this type of work around safety, around belonging, around equity, that we will have changes made that are actually sustainable and actually effective, not just for the kids, but for the adults too, because adults deserve safety, adults deserve belonging.
Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools hopes this project will lead to fewer school-based referrals to the justice system.
I feel really heard and listened to, and I think that's it's surreal, I guess, because I've never actually had that. Sure, I've spoken to and spoken up about, but I've never really had adults really listen to me and acknowledge me as an equal, I guess.
In Winston-Salem, Katie Nordine, Fox 8 News.
The Winston.
Okay. So this is, let me see, I'm going to make sure I'm sharing my screen again, the right screen. So this has been a really incredible opportunity for me as an adult to listen. And now I want to turn it over to Brooke. Brooke, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would love to. Hey guys, thanks for joining. My name's Brooke and I'm a senior at the middle college at the Forsyth Tech. And I've been part of this Lead Together experience since it started over the past summer. And I've also been involved with Triad Restorative Justice since I was in 9th grade. So I've been in this program for a really long time, and I really see the value in restorative justice and how this program can really lead to, like Ellen was saying in that video by WXII, how it can lead to sustainable changes in schools. So I've been trying to think of how I would sum up Lead Together, because it really is just this experience where you feel safe because you're able to build relationships with others in the program. I'm just going to look at these questions right quick and speak to each of them.
So I think, Brooke, I'm curious if you could maybe direct your attention to this like generational difference of like why you think your generation could benefit from restorative practices, but also like what are the differences between adults and how they perceive your generation?
Yeah, sure thing. I think the main thing that I think of that's different is obviously like the technological advances. Since you guys have been in school and now that I'm in school, I have all of this information at my fingertips, right? So I feel like that kind of gives our generation today a more global perspective on everything that's going on, as opposed to maybe a more local one that you guys had access to while you guys were in school. And I see that as a strength, but I also see how it can have its drawbacks as well. And how restorative justice can like work into that and make matters better with that. So I think we do have this more, I think Gen Z has this more global perspective just because we are able to see everything that's going on through social media, through just about everything that's happened. So I think having that realization that other things are going on makes us more open-minded, but it can also, how do I word this? I guess it gives us this feeling that there's a burden on us to make these things right. Not that they're not like for global purposes, let's say. Not that there is a burden on us, but I feel like restorative justice can just help us better grasp why these things are going on and how to best go about dealing with them, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. And what do you wish that the adults knew about your experience of safety and belonging in schools?
So what I wish adults knew, which I'm sure you guys do know, it's just like there's more of a focus on it now. I feel like emotional safety, not just physical safety, like, oh, our door's locked, oh, what's a fire drill procedure like. Beyond physical safety, when I think of safety and belonging in schools, I also think of like mental and emotional safety. Not that that wasn't a part of your education experience when you guys were in school, but I feel like there's a lot more emphasis on it now. And I feel that that's really important to me feeling safe in school. I'm not going to feel safe in school. I'm not going to feel comfortable with the people that I'm around. I'm not going to learn as well if I don't have this feeling of emotional belonging. Like, do I know the people I'm sitting next to? Stuff like that. And that's kind of where Lead Together sort of files in. It like creates bridges and stuff like that. Can I read this question that Dean Clifford posted in the chat?
Yes.
Cool. How has Lead Together and the emphasis on restorative justice impacting the dangers and difficulties of bullying? We've had a bunch of different solutions to that. So I don't know if you guys saw in the video, but we had we created a mind map. We like brainstormed different harms in schools, and one of them was bullying. It was on that WXII video. And let's see, how is it impacting the dangers and difficulties of bullying? Through restorative practices and also just the youth's ideas, we've come up with ways to like deal with bullying and how to go about bullying when it occurs, because ultimately it's harmful to everybody involved. So we have really thought a lot about how to address harms like that.
Yeah, and I just dropped in the chat the Google Doc of many of the solutions that the youth were coming up with. And I think, you know, what Lead Together is trying to do is find that vehicle, that conduit for youth to give their input on these solutions that adults are putting forward, or we have had in the school systems for years, decades, and saying, does this actually work? Does this actually help? Is this effective? Or would you do something different? Because like Brooke said, they have a different mindset. This generation is not like any other that's come before. And we could probably say that about every generation. But I think as adults, we really need to respect that experience and make sure that we're embedding their experiences into the tools that we're offering to get to safety, to get to belonging. So thank you, Brooke. And then this last question, this green question, when you see a harm happen in school, what responses are helpful? What's not helpful? These are the words from another one of our participants, Marissa. She says, when I've witnessed a harm being done in a school, oftentimes the faculty and school officials will either brush it off as though it didn't happen or sit the student body down in an assembly and address the facts, saying, we're here for you. More often than not, this doesn't help. It brushes aside the fact that a harm was done and does not address the needs of the students, as well as the needs of the person who did the harming. I find that it is more helpful to take initiatives that offer those resources to all people, regardless of their role in the situation. It helps to give spaces for students to talk about what had happened, what they need going forward, but also some form of distraction and structure if they don't want to address it at that moment. Overall, what students need when harm is done is initiative to show that the faculty care for students and are genuinely concerned with their well-being, rather than just brushing it aside or saying a few words. Because let's face it, actions really do speak louder than words. So I hope that that is a helpful insight. Thank you, Brooke. And Brooke, if you feel like you need to speak throughout the rest of this panel, know that you're welcome to share your wisdom. So we're going to shift back and I'm going to toss it over to Latrell, but I wanted to go through a few slides about restorative practices. I know the question is, what does this look like in our community? And one example is I just left Main Street Academy, which is one of the places where youth are sent if their harm is deemed by the district to be necessary for them to be excluded out of their school community. And we've been doing circles with them once a week where we change the topic and they are invited to share, they sit in a circle, and that's how we're building community there. There's many other practices that allow us to build community, and the thing that I hope that you walk away with is that 80% of restorative justice, restorative practices is about building those community and maintaining those relationships. What restorative justice is kind of famous for is how we respond to harm and how we process harm in a different way. And that is important, but we call that the 20%. That's because it's not effective if the relationships were never there to begin with. So restorative justice is about community building. It's about accountability, not just saying sorry, but really taking responsibility and changing your behavior is what we mean by accountability. It's about healing, empowering those who are harmed. It's invitational. We really shy away and don't encourage mandated restorative justice, but that gets tricky when we're implementing it. It's solutions-based and it's getting to the root of the harm. What it's not is it's not only about discipline. It often gets discussed when it comes to alternatives to discipline, but it's more than that. We really try and move away from the punitive mindset and also not as the permissive. A big myth in restorative justice is that we just let people off the hook with what harm they've done, and that's not true restorative justice. We really bring all of the people who have been part of the harm to the table. We don't enforce this justice as third parties. Everybody has a say. And it's not just circles, though. If you start to do some research on restorative justice, you'll see a lot of things about circles. And now I want to toss it to my friend Latrell, who will start to talk more about how this is going to look in the school district.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Ellen, for that wonderful assist. And, you know, I love that today's program takes place on February the 1st. As I'm thinking about February 1st, I think about the 4 young men at North Carolina A&T who sat down and, you know, just the advocacy in creating a just world that comes with that thinking. And so anytime before I start, I'm always wanting to start with the vision of our district. I think that vision gives us sight to see. In fact, I got a reminder the other day that I need to get my eyes checked, and I'm coming up on that year to make sure that I get that scheduled. And, you know, one of the things that I get to do amongst others is here, of course, as Sylvia shared, I serve as the director of SEL and restorative practices here in Winston-Salem. And I have the joy and the honor of working with educators consistently, get to meet with Ellen quite often. And we chat about what does it mean to become a restorative community? What does it mean to really be a school that's restorative in nature, right? And so I love starting with our vision. I really love our vision. I've been here since August, and one of the first things I'm always looking at, okay, what is the vision? So I can see if I can buy into the vision, right? And so when I saw the vision of our district, I was like, yes. This is it. I love it. This is awesome. And so our district vision says that Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools will be the best place to learn and work through excellence, collaboration, and inclusiveness. And so when I look at this vision statement, I'm reminded that this vision statement is about Brooke and her peers, but this vision statement is also about Latrell and my colleagues, and I love that, right? And so another vision that drives my work here in the district is our SEL vision statement. And this SEL vision statement really speaks to, I won't read it to you, but it really speaks to this idea of collaborating with our family and collaborating with you all, our community partners, making sure that we are doing what Brooke said, so beautifully stated, about creating those safe physical and emotional spaces for our young people, and that our spaces are nurturing, where we are focused on relationships, right? That we are focused on not just, you know, promoting SEL for students, but also making sure that we are in a space where we are focused on the adult behaviors and empowering our adults as well, right? And so the last vision statement that I want to bring you with, as we're thinking about restorative practices and, you know, and the work within our district, is this vision statement, the vision statement for restorative practices. And that is Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools will be a restorative environment. I love that because it's declarative. It's like, we will be this, right? And so not passive at all. And so that we will be a restorative environment that will build and maintain positive relationships between school and community while enhancing social emotional competence and pro-social behaviors for just students. No, it says for students and adults. So again, there is that space where the district vision statement talks about that this is the best place to learn and work. So that's about students and adults. We look at our SEL vision statement, and our SEL vision statement is, you know, focused on students and adults. And then our restorative practice vision statement is again focused on students and adults. And so again, I feel like it's always important just to make sure that we are grounded in our vision and that we know what it is that our goals are as a district and before I start. And so the work of our core values, you can go ahead and move on to the next slide, Ellen, thank you. The work of our core values really speak to this work, in my opinion, of restorative justice and practice within our district. And so when we're thinking about being student-centered, we're making sure that we're focused on the needs of every single child, right? Not just the one that comes to us with, you know, a bright red bow, but we're focused on the needs of every single child in our district. We're being accountable. So you heard Ellen talk about, like, hey, restorative practice justice doesn't mean that there's no accountability, that there's none of that, but there's support that's offered. And we're making sure that we're taking responsibility as adults for and reflect on our impact for the student outcomes. And then there's that collaboration. I love that word. And we're thinking about how we work together to support our students, how we work together to support each other, right? In our efforts and our work, equity, making sure that we are being responsible and making sure that we are addressing any barriers where a student cannot be successful, and that, you know, we're still holding those high expectations and operating with integrity. And so as we move forward, you know, just to share at a very high level, I want to talk about this definition of what is SEL. And so that's one of the huge takings within my department, is having this focus of SEL. And Ellen, you can move forward. Thank you. And so I want to give you a moment to read this definition and then put into the chat, if you can, please. I want to offer you the opportunity to put into the chat what stands out to you as we think about restorative practice justice within Winston-Salem. What stands out to you with this definition? And again, I think it's always important for us to ground ourselves, for us to have the same understanding, that shared language and shared understanding that Ellen talked about earlier. But I want you to just call out into the chat what stands out to you with this definition. And Ellen, if you could share out some of those things that you're seeing in the chat for me.
Yeah. As Sharon said, it advances equity. Julie said it requires us to feel and show empathy. Dean says SEL is about wholeness, eliminating the separation between cognitive learning and then the physical, social, emotional safety. I appreciate you bringing all of those types of safety in. Yeah. Sylvia is recognizing that it's about managing emotions. Megan says to establish and maintain supportive relationships, collaborative relationships, or managing emotions, which is no small feat for teenagers, and I would say adults
or
too.
Us either.
It equips people to live in society. It frames everything from a growth and restorative perspective versus punitive and exclusionary. Brooks says it sounds like SEL goes hand in hand with academic learning. It should definitely be cherished in education.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing out what stood out with you, for you as it relates to what SEL is. And this is a definition that we've adopted from our friends and partners at Castle. And so we always, again, like to make sure that we have the same understanding of what it is that we mean when we say, as a district, we are committed to SEL, what it is that what we say when we say that we are going to focus on SEL within our schools and within our district. And so some of the things that really stand out to me every single time I read this definition is that SEL is a process, right? It's not something that just happens overnight, but it's something that we have to consistently be intentional about and work at, right? And that it's not just, you know, for our young people, but it's about adults as well. I'm very passionate about adult learning, very passionate about adult SEL. And so, you know, want to always make sure that we're calling out that space that SEL is about young people and adults, right? And then that bottom paragraph, love that. SEL advances educational equity and excellence through authentic school, family, community partnerships. So it really takes a village, right? The notion of going back to that space where it takes a village and takes us all coming together to make sure that we are providing these opportunities for our young people so that they can thrive and be in those safe, healthy, and just communities. All right, and so as we look at the next slide looks at the framework of SEL, right? And so as we look at this framework of SEL, you'll see the 5 core competencies of SEL in that center part of the wheel, right? So we see self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And we know that these are all connected, but just think a moment as I talk, broadly at a very high level about each of these and how they may show up as we think about restorative practices, right? So as we think about self-awareness really involves this deep exploration of our own emotions and our identities, and for us doing the work to find out who we are, right? For us to be in a space where we are addressing our implicit biases, right? And being in that space where, again, thinking about implicit bias, it's implicit, it's not explicit. So we have to do the work to make sure that we're addressing, and we can't address what we're not aware of. So this is that exploration, that self-exploration, where we are, figuring out who we are, what makes us who we are. I feel like from year to year, I'm constantly in this space of changing and evolving and becoming, right, Brooke? And you'll continue to do that, right? And so then as we think about self-management, how we self-motivate, how we self-regulate, how do we, be in the space where we are meeting our personal goals, but also meeting the goals of the collective? How are we, making sure that we are goal setting and, moving forward and managing our stress in a way that is healthy, right? And so then as we look at social awareness, we get to the green part, these green areas are really about how we do things with other people. So as we get to the social awareness, it's about how we understand ourselves, how we understand others, how we understand others, but in particularly others that are different from us, right? So how are we doing that? How are we taking on the perspectives of diverse people? And making sure that we are expressing gratitude for the differences that are amongst us. And then relationship skills. When we think about relationship skills, how we are collaborating and coordinating with each other, how are we working together as a team? How are we making sure that these things are taking place? And so then responsible decision making. As we're thinking about responsible decision making is, what is my ethical responsibility to myself? What is my ethical responsibility to those that I am in relationship with consistently, right? And so I should always be in a space where I'm making caring and responsible decisions, right? And so as we think about those outer parts of the ring, which really always allows me to be in a space where I'm thinking about restorative practices as well as that social emotional competence, is that we want to make sure that students are able to see these 5 core competencies in all areas of their life. So in each classroom, it's not just, oh, I go to Miss Adams' classroom and she's rocking it out with relationships and she's rocking it out with SEL and all these things are apparent. But then I go to Miss Fox's classroom and Miss Fox has, it is just not a welcoming and inclusive environment. She does not make me feel like I belong in her class, right? And so it's that space of making sure that we are intentionally thinking about our classroom, do a lot of work with our instructional services to begin those conversations of how do we embed SEL and restorative practices into a student's something that they experience every single day, right? And so it's really about, as we think about that classroom, it's like, what does your classroom feel like when somebody walks in, right? Do they feel like, yes, this is the place to be? Or do you even want to be there, right? And so we're really in that space where we're focused in on that. And then as a school, I feel like I heard Ellen say earlier, where you're focused in on that space of, looking at your practices and your policies. And so as we're looking at our schools and doing that work, thinking about overall, what is the school-wide culture and what are our practices and our policies, and do they, all of them, support our students? And so this is some of the work that we have, continue to build upon in our district, and then also making sure that we are in a space that we are collaborating with our families and our caregivers. We know that our parents are experts of their children, right? And that they are our students. A lot of times they are students' first experience with social emotional learning, and then making sure that we're also having aligned learning opportunities for our students and connection with our communities. And so as we continue to think about restorative practices and how that looks, I want to bring your attention to the next slide, which talks about the indicators of school-wide SEL. And so as we think about the indicators of school-wide SEL, I'm going to focus mainly on the left side, which says indicators of school-wide SEL. I'll focus in on that. But as we talk about indicators of school-wide SEL, as I was reading these and I look at them consistently, they're constantly a space where they drive a lot of the work that I do. It is really that focus, and there's 10 of them here, right? So there's this focus on adult SEL. Right? There's this focus on adult SEL where adults have the opportunity to engage and collaborate with each other and to build trusting relationships with each other, right? So that's what that focus on adult SEL. Our adults within our district have that space where they can connect with each other. They can have time spending on the, engaging with SEL for themselves, right? Because we know that that's where authentic modeling for our students is going to happen, is when we're modeling SEL competencies, when we're being restorative every single day. So then and I won't go through all of them, but then there's that space of thinking about making sure that our environments are supportive. And so you see the indicator of supportive school and classroom climate. So as we think about supportive school and classroom climates, we want to make sure that we are being culturally responsive and that we're focused on building relationships and building community. That's what that indicator speaks to, right? A continuum of integrated supports, making sure that we're providing supports for every single student, that everybody within the community, their needs are being met. And so this is what we're focused on here in Winston. And then that next indicator, I said I wasn't going to go through all of them, but it looks like that's what I'm doing, Sylvia, right? So as we look at that next indicator is supportive discipline, where we're in a space where a lot of times when we think about discipline, it is very punitive. I saw one time where it said, I was watching a video or a quote, or I can't remember where I saw it, honestly, but it said that when a student is struggling with reading, we do more. When a student is struggling with math, we do more. When a student is struggling with discipline, guess what? Do we do more? No, we do less, right? And so we want to make sure that we are in a space that we are doing more with discipline and that we are supporting our students in a way that helps them, provides them with opportunities where they can learn and grow. And when they, if they have to be exited from the community for a moment in time, that when they come back, guess what? They feel welcomed. They feel like, hey, I can still thrive here. There's people who care about me that want to see me succeed, right? So there's that space of supportive discipline. And then making sure, again, that, there's SEL instruction that's taking place is another indicator that SEL is integrated with academic instruction. I talked about that already, but there's youth voice and engagement. That our youth are at the table with us making decisions. That, Brooke, I'm so excited to see your face and to hear the voices of your peers, because that's where our solutions happen, is when our youth are at the table and a part of this. And then again, going back to the importance and how critical it is for us to engage with our families and to engage with the community to make sure that we are doing things with each other. And so this, as a district, these indicators, this is what we're focused in on. And so when I think about restorative practices, I'm sure that many things popped up for you where hopefully you can see that alignment and how that is connected with the work of restorative practices. And so as we move to that next slide, I really love this diagram here, this visual representation of restorative practices, and it's from Oakland Unified School District. And I really love it because what this is saying is 100% of students should engage in community building. 100% of students should engage in this space of building relationships within the school, right? And so as we think about, and that's at the tier one, at the core level, how are we doing this? How are we providing our students those opportunities to make sure that they have a community to be restored to, right? That Ellen talked about. And so then as we think about the tier 2 and tier 3, when we have to start providing extra support for students who need that, they're still in a space where they have opportunities to participate in, you know, that community building, right? Because if you get to tier 2 and there's just that space of tier 2 and tier 3, and there's that space of trying to do the intense work, again, what are you restoring to? Because there's not a foundation, right? And so we want to make sure that as a district that we are focused in on how we are laying that foundation. How are we focused on trust and building those relationships, so that when something does happen, that there's something to be restored to. So that's, in my opinion, a beautiful illustration of our goals as a district and thinking about, tier 1, 2, and 3. And as you move forward to the next slide, and I'll wrap up, of course, because I want to definitely make sure that I save space. I see the chat is going off, and so trying not to get distracted by what's happening in the chat. But Ellen, if you can go ahead and move to the next slide for me, please.
Is this it, or is it this our goals?
Our goals. This is the next slide. You're already on this one.
Can you see it? I advanced it on my screen.
Can't see it. And Brooke says she can't see it.
Can you see it now? Okay.
Yes. All right, thank you. So as we think about our goals with restorative practices, our goals are to, again, make sure that we are embedding, restorative practices and SEL across our school community. Right now, we are engaging with, our schools and principals that have just reached out to our department and, and see the need and the desire to want to do that. But overall, like, our goal will be to engage all schools with SEL and restorative practices. And so making sure, again, that we are establishing those collaborative partnerships. And a huge portion of restorative practices is making sure that we're doing things with people, right? So we want to make sure that we are doing that. I have a team of currently 3 SEL coaches. And so those SEL coaches provide ongoing professional development and coaching support to our school community. So they are regularly following up with schools and to support schools in the areas of restorative practices and SEL. We're making sure that we're not working in a silo too. So making sure that we're in a space where we're aligning our work under, initiatives that are currently taking place, and making sure that we are aligned with MTSS and trauma informed and all of the other things that are taking place within the district. And then ultimately, another goal of ours is to reduce the disparities in achievement and discipline outcomes. And so we want to make sure that we are doing that. And these are our goals with restorative practices. And so if you could go ahead and move to that next slide for me. And so love this, sorry, somebody is falling. And so I love this idea of a tale of 2 schools. This graphic, it really illustrates the positive differences we can make when we consistently put in the time and in the energy to shift our culture to this space of thinking restorative, right? And so as we think about Carlos and what Carlos experiences, when you think about what Carlos is experiencing, Carlos, when we're talking about a tale of 2 schools, Carlos had a heated argument with his parents. Carlos had a heated argument with his parents before leaving for school. So he's running late. Let's see the difference that restorative policies and practices can make. So you see on the left, there's that zero tolerance education system. And then on the right, there's the restorative practices based education system, right? And so the zero tolerance education system, these are just in general things. Of course, it's, doesn't necessarily mean that this is how it happened. It just gives you an idea so that you can see the difference. So, and, Carlos arrives at school. I apologize for my phone that keeps ringing, but Carlos arrives at school. Carlos is late to first period class. Carlos gets into a minor altercation in the cafeteria, and then later that afternoon. So as we think about a zero tolerance education systems, Carlos, he is greeted by metal detectors and a police search. His teacher scolds him in front of the class. Carlos talks back and is given detention. A school police officer detains and arrests both students. Carlos is held in a juvenile detention facility all afternoon, missing school. He now has an arrest record and is facing suspension. So when we look at what could have possibly happened with a restorative practices-based education system, we see that teachers and administrators welcome him and his fellow students as they enter. So having that warm welcome greeting. His teachers wait until after class to speak with Carlos to learn more and set up a meeting with his school counselor. There is possible a space for students, peer mediators, and support staff intervene, have the students sit down together and de-escalate the situation. And then Carlos and other students agree to help clean the cafeteria during a free period. Carlos meets with his counselor and parents after school to help resolve the conflict at home, right? So that is the difference between what is happening in a zero tolerance education system where things are just punitive and what is happening in a restorative school environment. And so you can go ahead and go to the next slide. And so I really want to, leave space for us to have any conversations if there's any questions. And I can drop this link to this video in the chat. And so that if you want to watch it at a later time, that you have the access and ability to do that. It is a really powerful video of what students want, and they really want to be in that space where we are focused on relationships in our schools, and much of what the students from Lead Together discussed. And so we'll go ahead and move forward. And so as we think about what Ellen and I have shared at a very high level. And, of course, we can talk about these restorative practice, restorative justice, social emotional learning. We can literally talk about this all day, but we do want to recognize and honor your time and address any questions that you have. And so I'll look at the chat now. But as you think about restorative justice, restorative practices, what is one word that is coming to mind when you're thinking about both of these? What is coming to mind when you're thinking about what this means for students? Is there one word that's coming to mind? And if you could go ahead and put that in the chat. And then Ellen, if you want to let me know if there are any questions that I need to address within.
Yes, there's really great words coming in. But with Trail, one person's asking kind of more concrete about like, what is this work looking like? Like how many schools have been trained? What is the implementation plan? Do you want to give the phases, or at least what phase we're in right now?
So we are in the engaging phase, which is, so we've created an implementation plan. And so once that's public, I will be more than happy to share that with you all so that you can have access to that. But our plan currently looks like about 4 phases. And so at that implementation plan, at the 4th, when we're thinking about the 4 phases, it's really about engaging. And engaging our stakeholders, engaging our schools, making sure that we have that shared language, providing trainings for folks, and doing that. And then, embedding into our systems and making sure that we're using a restorative lens amongst, in all of our meetings and things that we are doing within the district office as well as within our schools, and that we're continuing to be in a space where we are embodying those practices and evaluating, and that again, we're strengthening the capacity of our adults and giving them the skills to be able to lead this work in their building, and that we're creating that buy-in. So right now, as I stated before, we have started as a district. We have started with those schools that have reached out to us and that want to be trained. This year, we have 3 restorative practices trainings that will be offered for central office staff as well as for schools. And then as schools reach out, we will provide those trainings for staff as well. and work with them and to make sure that we are engaging them. And so eventually our goal will be to make sure that we are engaging all of our students and all of our schools in the work of restorative practices. But as of right now, we've started with the schools that have reached out to us, which is quite a few. So our hands are definitely full right now with
And
the schools.
can I add one thing too? Because
Yeah.
Dean Clifford said the schools that don't reach out may be the ones that need you the most. And Dean, I hear you on that, but speaking from direct experiences, being someone who's been sent into a school where there was not buy-in, the seed of restorative justice cannot be planted. And there's some really valid reasons why people are not ready and ripe to receive this. Like somebody brought up the conditions of the pandemic. We know teachers are burned out. We know people are just doing the best they can day to day to survive. So in a ironic way, it would be unrestorative in some communities to try and implement restorative justice, because it is a paradigm shift, y'all. And it takes 3 to 5 years before school can really start to see that turnaround.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more we could say about that, but it is coming to the end of the trail. I know we have ways for people to stay connected with you and for Triad Restorative Justice. Do you want to share?
Yeah, and so my email is right there, and I would love to engage with you if you have more, questions or still need some clarity around any of those things. But there's my email right there, LN Adams. So LN Adams at WSFCS.K12.NC.US. And then my mobile, you'll see that right there as well. If you're on Twitter, you can definitely follow our SEL page there as well. And, I really just appreciate the opportunity to share and engage with you today.
Thank you. And then there's my contact information. We will share these slides with y'all at the end. These are hyperlinks. If you want to get involved in the formal restorative justice process or be a volunteer with us, we're taking on volunteers and we could use the support because it's hard, long work. And the more people we have, many hands make light work. So we would love to bring you in. I just received an email today. The county, the school district is inviting people from the community in to be mentors in a variety of ways. So there's a sign up form that's due by February 9th where you could be one of those people who's making the community, these school communities, feel more restorative. I've linked the full article, and then I've also dropped in the chat the youth's ideas. One way you could, do something is actually read them. They spend a long, hard time thinking about this stuff and communicating it. So that resource is there, and it's about not just nodding our heads at the youth, but saying let us be in solidarity with you. Let us figure this out. And then if you also work with any youth and you're trying to maybe you're struggling with how to really sincerely engage their voice, TRJ co-designed and co-facilitates a youth empowerment workshop with our, wonderful youth like Brooke. And we would be happy to come in and help y'all make that shared language, shared communication stronger so that we can have some actions that are grounded in that solidarity. I think we are out. I know Sylvia said wrap it by 1 p.m. Hope that
we're at 12:59. 12:59, Sylvia. You're on mute, Sylvia. You're on mute, Sylvia.
There we go. There I am. Thanks so much. Also, I want to encourage those of you on the call who have experience in this regard, put information in the chat. We're starting now with Faith in the City to include the chat along with our videos because there's so much good information, questions that people have raised that can start ideas going and people getting involved in many ways. So once again, I want to thank our guests today and all of you who've joined us. Our reminder, our video will be posted in the Facebook page and also on Knollwood's website. And all of that information is available in the chat. Thank you, Ellen, Latrell, Brooke, and all the others who have provided such good and engaging information today. Faith in the City will be back next month on Tuesday, March the 1st. And so we hope to see you then. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sylvia.